Hello there, it's midnight and I'm the Midnight Painter. By the time you're seeing this, that means I have already finished the painting behind me, Ophelia by John Everett Millais. This is going to be my very first videos on YouTube. I'm very glad that you're all here. And this is going to be also one of my very first videos where I recreate the historical paintings, where I recreate the paintings that I feel emotionally drawn to. Meanwhile, I'll do research and explain the meanings. I'll do some analysis behind it because I think that it would be amiss to just paint without exploring the history behind the painting, behind Ophelia, who she is, and also the history about the painting itself. So that's why I did it. So I made this video in order to quench my thirst for knowledge and to dive deeper into the art world. So yeah, why did I paint this painting? The first reason is, why not? No, I'm kidding. The first reason is, I think I have free will. I have too much free will, I guess. But anyway, I think that this painting is something that dragged me out of retirement. Calling it a retirement would be an exaggeration. It's just a long break before I find inspiration again. And this painting helps me reconnect to my hobby, and it just fire up my ass into okay, it's time to pick up a brush. And yeah, I just need some inspiration, some motivation, and something beautiful. I did a massive painting before, and I think, oh, that's gonna be my magnum opus. And I stopped painting for a while, and while looking for inspirations of something that can surpass my previous work, I came across this painting. I knew this before. This one just clicked immediately, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna recreate this because why not? Okay, yeah, then again, why not? This is way out of my league, to be honest, because what you're seeing behind me is something way out of my league because I'm just an amateur artist and I have no background in art or anything. This is just my hobby. I swear to God, I wish I could share how to paint something like this and that. I wish I could share it to you all, but I don't know how because I don't have any kind of particular professional skills. I just paint. It's my hobby and I just want to share it to you all, how I did it, and I just want to share. Before getting to know this painting, I just feel like it's a beautiful painting, of course, aesthetic wise. The colors, the settings, the model, she's wearing a pretty dress. After I finish this painting, the more I dive into it, the more I adore it. So that's why we're here today, and to explore further. I'm just like you. I don't know much about Ophelia or Shakespeare, but I did my research. So yeah, let's find out together. And that's all about me. What about her? When I dive into this, I started to notice that this is not the only version of Ophelia. This is by John Everett Millais as the painting behind me, but there are around 50 representations of Ophelia throughout history. There's one by Hehe. I hope I'm not butchering his name. The reason why I chose this painting is because it looks challenging to execute it. I was feeling crazy. I love a good challenge for myself. I mean, who can stop me, right? Who can stop me? I mean, the more audacity that you have for doing challenging tasks, the feeling after achieving such goals would be rewarding. Consider it a sign. Do something difficult. Do something that scares you, because I once heard a quote saying, if the dream does not scare you, it is not big enough. I mean, if start doing something impossible, even if you're trying to execute it just 1%, you're 1% on your way of achieving it and making it into a reality. So go ahead and do it. And that's all about who I am. So what about Ophelia? Who is she? Well, let's find out together, shall we? So, who is Ophelia? So, Shakespeare wrote a play called Hamlet, and Ophelia is the character in that play. She's a young woman. She's beautiful. She's young. So she was caught in between the demands for her family and Hamlet, aka the main character of the play, but you know, we're gonna talk about him later. So in the play, there's Ophelia's father Polonius and her brother Laertes. Well, at first I thought the name was Laertes, but no, it's Laertes, like layer and then tes. Yes, so both her brother and her father urged her to distance herself from Hamlet because they believed that his love for her is kind of like ingenuine. When I dive into this history of Ophelia, I found that Ophelia comes from the Greek word called help or aid. That explains a lot, right? Because Shakespeare's often used the character names to foreshadow something about his characters before the dialogue is even spoken. Might this foreshadow something? Does this mean that nobody is gonna help her? Or is she gonna surrender to her own fate? So this video is gonna be divided into two sections. The first one is gonna be tragedy and the second one is gonna be the beauty. I want to like separate it. I want to talk about the tragedy first to understand the background of the painting and also the character Ophelia, and then we're gonna talk about the beauty, because let's start with the something sad first and then talk about something that is more positive. First, let's dive into Ophelia's tragedy. To fully understand her breakdown, let's dive into the society that she was living in, a society that never allowed her to even exist as her own person. So as I mentioned before, Ophelia is the daughter of Polonius, and her father was the counselor to King Claudius, a family member to Elsinore. So as you're seeing on screen, this is Elsinore. When people think of Elsinore, they would immediately conjure up the dark, mysterious images of the deep, dark castle in Shakespeare's play Hamlet. But I just found out that Shakespeare never seemed to be in Denmark, so at least as far as anyone knows. And Elsinore is the town, and the castle referred to in the play was called Kronborg. So back to the social setting, the society that she was living in. Back then, the society was deeply patriarchal, like even now for fuck's sake, I hate it here too, but it's a society where men dominate the power structures, you know, and women are expected to obey, even under a queen, Queen Elizabeth. In that society, Elizabethan England was a fiercely patriarchal society where, you know, it heavily restricted what women could and could not do. So women could not attend school or university. So that translates to their work opportunities are pretty much limited. Even professions like medicine or laws are also off limits. Even the profession of acting was also off limits. Instead, they would hire a man with higher voice to replace the role of a woman. In addition to these legal restrictions, women were also bound to social restrictions and expectations that did not equally apply to men. So back then, sermons and books are written to encourage women to obey to male authority, and whether that of their father or their husband. This patriarchy also shaped the ideas about morality. The male desire was treated as natural and powerful, while that of women's are treated as emasculating or threatening. So they are expected to be obedient, virtuous, and silent, yet their actions are constantly scrutinized by the eyes of men. So to further understand this, I dive into and I read some articles about the analysis of Ophelia and how this affects the image of Ophelia. A French novelist and philosopher, Annie Leclerc, pointed out that women's value is often judged by how they help men define themselves. So this is what she specifically writes, that women is valuable insofar as she permits men to fulfill him being as men. In the 19th century, Ophelia is often seen as a work of art instead of like a person or a character. She was never referred to as a character, so there's various quotes to describe her, such as an inimitable sketch. True, I agree, because I cannot replicate that. It cannot be imitated, right? One of Shakespeare's most beautifully drawn female portraits, and a beautiful and finished painting. So this makes Ophelia representations a more common yet kind of like restricted view of femininity. So Ophelia does not deal with anything except for men's rules. She does not have an alternative voice or thoughts. She echoes what is said to her. And in one of the critics, they said she expresses acquiescence, uncertainty, and obeisance. She utters half lines. In the play, from what I know, from what I discovered, because of Hamlet's voice, which is more overpowering, overwhelming, Ophelia has less powerful voices. And in the play, we kind of like not hear Ophelia because she utters half lines. Another critic, Lee R. Edwards, pointed out that we can imagine Hamlet's story without Ophelia, but Ophelia has no story without Hamlet. So her image becomes an object for beauty, which is aestheticized by kind of like the kind of morbid representation of her corpse, and through her death she becomes a separate entity besides Shakespeare's Hamlet, but not for a good reason. All of this shows why Ophelia's story is kind of tragic. She's always told how to act, how to feel, how to love, and even after her death, her image is aestheticized. In a society like this, women's lives are controlled and objectified. Her breakdown becomes almost inevitable. And when she finally breaks, her world collapses. The society that she lives in labels her mad. So not just the society that restricted her, it is also a reason for her breakdown. Her descent to madness is a combination of two other external factors. It's Hamlet and her father. So it all began by how Ophelia is rejected by Hamlet, her lover. From what I found, there are a lot of reasons for his rejection. I'm not an expert in Shakespeare or anything, so if you know anything about Shakespeare, feel free to comment down below, let me know. But here's what I found. There's a term called antic disposition, and Hamlet acts insane to hide his true plan to kill Claudius, the king. Some people believe that pushing Ophelia away is part of his act. Another reason for this rejection is it comes from misogyny and also his anger. So I don't know much about Hamlet, but I found out that because Hamlet is angry about how quickly his mother married his uncle, and he directs this anger to Ophelia. So when Ophelia returns the mementos, sort of like a souvenir, the gifts that Hamlet gave her, he was asking as if is it her own choice, which further supports his suspicion that, which is caused by his mother's remarriage, that women are unpredictable and untrustworthy. At that time, Ophelia became very confused when Hamlet kept denying that he ever gave her anything or loved her, and he repeatedly told her to go to a nunnery. It is also having a very misogynistic term because at that time, nunnery has two meanings. It can also mean it's a place where men pay for sex, and he repeatedly say, "Get thee to the nunnery," until his fifth attempt, and his final to a nunnery go. Here's the scene.
My lord, I have remembrances of yours that I have longed to redeliver. I pray you now receive them.
No, not I. I never gave you aught.
My honored lord, you know right well you did.
To a nunnery. Go.
So after that, Ophelia finally manages to say a few words as she tries to answer his confusing and kind of emotional accusations. And they said that men are not emotional. Interesting. Another reason for Hamlet's rejection is his suspicion. He may think that Ophelia is spying on him because she's following the orders of her father Polonius and the king Claudius. And the final reason would be protection. Hamlet knows his life is in grave danger and he's committing treason. Backstory: because he killed the king Claudius, he had to push her away to avoid the consequences of his own actions. And the final straw to her breakdown is her father's death. So Hamlet killed Ophelia's father, aka Polonius, in a fit of anger. He mistook Polonius for King Claudius. When Ophelia learned about her father's death, she was devastated and overpowered by grief. So these two factors, also the society that she lives in, created an emotional turmoil that Ophelia cannot handle. She was caught between heartbreak, grief, and the pressures of a society that was putting upon her. So Millais started to paint Ophelia, inspired by the story. So what makes Millais' Ophelia so unique? Ophelia is a very well-known character in the 19th century. She was actually one of the most popular Shakespearean heroines in English art. This painting behind me right here is part of the permanent collection in the Tate Britain in London. I would love to visit London just to see this in person, but I couldn't. So yeah, I painted it myself and I just hang it up on my wall in my bedroom. So yeah, Millais' version stood out the most is because of the moment that he depicted Ophelia and for the way he treated the subject. So yeah, when you're looking at this, how do you categorize the painting? Is it a portrait? Is it a landscape? From what I know, it's actually a combination of all of the genres. It is a mixture of portrait, a landscape, and still life, which is unusual at that time. But another reason for this one to stand out is because he does not show Ophelia after her death. He captures the moment just before her life ends. And secondly, her suffering isn't caused by a city environment. So while doing research, I found that, so if you take it in context, at that time in the UK, there's some other paintings like the Drowned Maiden that is set on London bridges, like the one right here by George Frederick Watts with a painting called Found Drowned, which depicts a woman drowned after having thrown herself into the river in despair to escape the shame of being called a fallen woman, someone who has lost her innocence and fallen from the grace of God. But in this case, Ophelia is surrounded by lush nature. She's surrounded by trees, by flowers. Ophelia's drowning is a moral lesson that depicts her yielding to love, her surrendering to fate, to heartbreak, and it was meant to caution young women to restrain their feelings and to act based on social expectations rather than acting on emotional impulses. I mean, like, come on, what's wrong with love? I mean, okay, let's break it down to a little bit. What's wrong with love? I mean, love is love. Like, God forbid someone dying for love. Or maybe I'm that type of person that, dies for love. You would become more sacrificial and you would be doing reckless things for love. Brings out the most extreme versions of you. I've never experienced it before, so I don't know. Maybe that's why I'm kind of like drawn to like extreme emotions, and some of the songs that depicts dying in love, dying for love, songs with related themes about dying in and for love. So yeah, get out there and love. I mean, you're not in this society where you're being ashamed of falling in love. I mean, love is love. That's my point. Love is love. That's it. But back to the story. So what you can see here, the way Ophelia's, her figure seems merged with the flowers, and there's flowers that are flowing into her dress, her body, and even her hair that further represents her depiction as Rose of May in Hamlet. Another unique aspect of this painting is the level of detail in this painting. Every flowers, every stem, every reflection on the water, you might think, oh, this is a photograph instead of like a painting. So in fact, some contemporary scholars compared it to a botanical study. So we'll dive into that later in the second half of the video. And the way he painted Ophelia too, her skin that is translucent, her half-open mouth, and her longing expression, it adds another sense of fragility. Even though she's on the verge of dying, there's still life to it. Over the centuries, Ophelia's representations have already moved from the margin to the center stage, but there's another tragedy that rips out of Hamlet's pages and it steps right into the real world, which leads to a death of a young woman. And this is the story of a woman called Elizabeth Siddal. The model that you're seeing here posed for Millais' Ophelia. So Elizabeth Siddal was discovered while working at a hat shop by a man called Walter Deverell, his Millais friend. In 1860, she married another Millais friend, Dante Gabriel Rossetti. Millais asked Elizabeth to pose in a bathtub in his London studio, and she wore an antique silver dress. I couldn't find the original dress, so if you have the dress, let me know. And the dress that Millais had bought in an antique shop for £4 just for this painting. Millais painted this painting in 2 separate stages. So the first one is for the nature, and the second stage is for painting Ophelia, because he dedicated most of his time painting the nature in spring and summer. The time dedicated to paint Ophelia has fallen in the winter time. So he began painting this landscape in July 1851. Rather than working in studio, he chose to surround himself in nature. And from what I know, he worked on this landscape up to 11 hours a day, 6 days a week, and over 5 months in 1851. And here's me trying to figure out how to collapse this timeline in just 1 week. Hello, I didn't know it's gonna take so much time. I'm a very kind of impatient person. I want my art to be quick. I want quick results, but it still has to be beautiful. But yeah, I'm very impatient with my art, but I'm trying to get more patient with my art. I'm trying to be more patient with myself. So turns out this painting took me 4 months, probably longer, to finish this piece behind me. And the painting is done, so am I. Here's the progress after a week. And at that time I thought, okay, well, it might take a month. Here's the progress after a month, 2 months, and 3 months. So back to the story. He painted Ophelia in winter times, right? So it's gonna be cold, and he's painting in his studio. And at that time, the heating technology is not developed yet. So what Millais did is to put the oil lamps underneath the bathtub to heat it up, to make the water warm. And there was one time the lamps went out, and Millais was so engrossed in his painting that he didn't even notice that the lamp went out. So yeah, poor Elizabeth. While posing for the painting, Elizabeth became quite cold and she fell ill. There was no national health services or easy access to medicine back then, so her father hired a private doctor for her. And when things got worse, when her father threatened Millais for legal action, Millais finally agreed to pay for her medical bills, which came to about £50, while it is equivalent to £7,000 today. Elizabeth struggled with poor health for the rest of her life, so the poppy Millais painted near Ophelia's hand took on another tragic meaning. In 1862, Siddal had her first daughter, and she suffered from her postpartum depression. Elizabeth was overdosed by laudanum, the toxin, an opiate from the poppy flower, and she passed away at the age of 32. There's also beauty with how the painting looks, the flowers, the beauty, the bright colors, and these images usually make us think of calm, life, and peace. And this painting lets nature speak for itself and its own truth. And here's the language of nature. Now, I don't have a mic that is attached to my collar, so I'm gonna use this for now. So if you're wondering, he did not use any cameras to capture Ophelia's pose or the nature around it. You can see the landscape or this tree trunk right here from the river. Millais saw these flowers and the trees and the nature by the riverbank in Hawks Mill. Because he painted the river scene in 5 months, you can notice that the flowers that bloom in different times of the year appear together. And now we're gonna compare Hamlet's text in relations to Millais' painting. Most of the flowers appeared in this painting right here often appeared in the play, and they're here because of their symbolic meaning. And this even includes the background plants, not just the flowers that Ophelia is holding right here. So we'll dive into it. In Act 4, following the death of her father, Hamlet's rejection, Ophelia loses her grip on reality. So as she prances through the halls in Elsinore, she passes out invincible flowers for those who meet her. And it was kind of like an eclectic variety of flowers that somewhat resembles her complex personality. Ophelia passes out rosemaries, fennels, rue, pansies, and daisies. And we'll dive into other flowers as well. And what you'll notice here is that her bouquet is kind of contradictory. There's flowers representing mourning and sadness, but there's also flowers representing happy remembrances. And there's flowers representing purity and innocence, like daisies, the white daisies right here. And it is put next to the flowers given as tokens to sexual or romantic partners. So let's start with rosemary. Rosemary is for remembrance because people usually use rosemary as parts to make wreaths, and it also serves as a forewarning to her tragic death. When Ophelia says there's rosemary that's for remembrance, she does so with intention. So she is no longer just influenced by others, by other characters in the play, but she also becomes an active character who can choose her own fate. So the next one is rue, not rue from Euphoria, but rue, the plant. Rue has a strong smell and bitter taste. So because of this, it is chosen as a representation for sorrow, regret, and repentance. Maybe that's why there's a saying, "you rue the day" comes from. In one research that I read, in medieval times, it is used as a medicine to hasten labor or an abortifacient. So this somewhat indicates Ophelia's unwanted pregnancy. So there's a line where Ophelia says, "There's rue for you, and here's some for me." She somewhat is announcing an unwanted pregnancy, which leads to another reason for her death. These are all speculated. You can feel free to let me know, because this is what I researched. Yeah, I put it down in the link in the comments, so feel free to check it out too. So let's look at the daisies. When you think of daisies, they're kind of like pure white and they're innocent, right? But when Ophelia gives out the flowers to the court, she mentioned Daisy, but she does not hand out Daisy. Her refusal to hand out Daisy already indicated that there's no purity or innocence in the court. And next up, if you take a look at Ophelia right here, you can see the rose and also a string of purple violets on her neck. So violets represents sadness, early death. In Hamlet, Ophelia says she has no violets to give because they withered when my father died. Laertes also wishes that violets may spring from Ophelia's grave. And if you take a closer look, there's a red poppy right here, and it is in next to a few daisies right here. So as mentioned before in the first part about Elizabeth Siddal's death, poppy is also a representation for death and mortality. And if you look further into the background, there's also a trees like a weeping willow right here. The branches are sort of like drooping, and you know, when you think of willow, you think of something serene. So willows are also a representation for sadness, depression, and it is somewhat leaning over Ophelia's body. Maybe that's why they call it weeping willow. Now, if you look closer right here next to her dress, there's also pansies, and it also signifies thought or remembrance. And near Ophelia's cheeks and dress, there's two roses. So one is on her cheek and the other one is on her dress. So roses are a symbol of love and beauty, and this also alludes to her brother Laertes, calling her the Rose of May, as we mentioned before. And if you look into the foreground, there's also a forget-me-nots. I don't have to explain its obvious meaning, right? Because the name already suggests that, and there's white flowers right here. I don't have the name for it, but when you look into the painting, it looks like buttercups. From what I know, it represents ingratitude or childishness. And if you look into the background right here, there's nettles that are hidden behind the willow's branches, and the nettles are a symbol of pain pain. And if you look further right here, you'll see even more flowers. The purple loosestrifes right here. These purple loosestrifes in the upper right hand corner of the painting, and it is near the edge of the frame. So Shakespeare actually meant the purple orchid. From what I know, you just can't casually plant orchids in the wild, right? Maybe that's why Millais replaced it with purple loosestrifes. I don't know. Maybe it's this intention. And the meadowsweet flowers to the left of the purple loosestrifes signify futility or the lack of purpose, the uselessness to Ophelia's death. So there are other symbols in the painting other than just plants and flowers. So what you're seeing here, Ophelia is lying on a river, right? From the research that I've conducted, rivers often symbolize the transition between life and death. So it is sort of like a bridge, not a bridge, but a transition. So Ophelia floats between life and death, between life and the afterlife. And I think, why water? Why a river? If we take it to a more modern lens, if you're into woo-woo stuff like me or manifestation stuff, no, it's not woo-woo, it's science proven, right? If you're into like manifestation, water holds memories. And maybe that signifies that, Millais is trying to help us imprint this image of Ophelia's in our heads, in our minds. And this painting alone has inspired so many different generations. When I see the manifestation methods, and there's one method that says, you have to hold a cup of water, then you whisper into it, it holds memories, and then you drink it. Yeah, your manifestation can come into life, it can come into fruition. So because of this idea of how water can hold memories, maybe that's why I was trying to make sense of it. Maybe it is coming from my perspective that, maybe he's trying to capture this moment and try to freeze it in time so we can just appreciate this image. Maybe Millais wanted to stick this image into our memories, make it to last for generations, and we cannot forget its past, its stories behind it, not just Ophelia or in Hamlet, but also the model herself in this painting, Elizabeth Siddal. Another symbolism in this painting is the pose. So as you're seeing here, the pose Millais asked Elizabeth Siddal to pose is a pose with an open arm and half open mouth. It somewhat refers to the religious image of the saints like the Virgin Mary. So in Millais' painting, her death is often shown as a kind of Christian sacrifice. Her arms are outstretched and her face is turned upward. So he's somewhat linking her death to something sacred or religious. And for me, this painting shows what beauty can be. Millais took Ophelia's pain and turned it into something beautiful. Besides the nature, we get to understand her story. He captured a very moment between life and death, and it somewhat signifies how fragile life really is. And Ophelia also reminds us that beauty can exist even in pain. As humans, we tend to sympathize with sadness. We often connect ourselves with tragedies or sad stories, sad art, because it helps us understand and process emotions, and to further go deeper on why the society is fixated on death with these taboo, morbid topics, why the image of a dead woman like Ophelia right here has captured so much attention from the Renaissance era to peoples today. I'll save these ideas for another video. And that concludes our video for today. I hope you guys enjoy it. I have finished this painting and I'm very proud of it. So key takeaway is, if you love something, feel free to do it. Do research, take some challenge for yourself, have some audacity to do it. If you want to explore more about Ophelia and understand her stories and the materials, the sources that I use for this video, scroll down in the description because I have already put all of the links and the resources I've used for this video. Feel free to revisit this video if you need any basic information about Ophelia, the painting, her backstory, the painting by John Everett Millais, or maybe your key takeaway is going to be have some audacity, have some courage to do something that scares you. that's also a lesson, right? So now enjoy your time in your day. I'm going to sleep now. It's midnight, and I'll see you guys soon. Good night. And I forgot to add in the very beginning of the video that I painted this painting because I love nature. I love flowers too. And I believe that we should all go outside and touch some grass. So yeah, so should I.